Good evening, all. Tonight, in my continuing reviews of bad 1960s science fiction movies, we come to one that's actually kind of fun. It's stupid, it's interesting, it's very weird, and sort of psychotronic is the only word I can really apply to it. And that's The Journey to the Seventh Planet from 1962. It's a co-production between the United States and Denmark. It was directed by Sidney Pink, who's an American director who did all sorts of things from spaghetti westerns to musicals to... He did a lot of low-budget science fiction movies. He was also called the master of the full-length 3D movie, because the first movie he did was called Buona Devil, and that used a different 3D process that you didn't need to wear the blue and red glasses to see the 3D effect. It used the projectors to create a 3D effect. Unfortunately, the 3D craze had basically burned out by about 1953. Nobody was making 3D pictures anymore. It was a gimmick, and people didn't like it that much. But he also made The Twonky, which is an adaptation of a Barry Melchior story, which was really quite good, about an alien that pretends to be a television set. And what it really is, it's an alien that gives people what they want, and takes over by doing that, which I thought was kind of interesting. Angry Red Planet, which is another one of my favorite bad science fiction movies, which has the unforgettable spider rat bat crab monster, one of the greatest, stupidest, cheesiest science fiction monsters ever created. Really quite a good movie, actually, although there's a lot of scenery chewing, a lot of overacting. Reptilicus, which again is a bad Danish science fiction movie about a monster that comes back to life from prehistoric times, and foolishly scientists take it back from somewhere that's frozen and it melts and comes back to life. A very silly looking monster, and there's some really bad effects too in that one. But anyway, getting back to Journey from the Seventh Planet, it stars primarily John Agar as Don. He's actually a bit understated in this. He doesn't do his usual scenery chewing, like, say, The Brain from Planet Arrows, where he was really over the top. In this one, he's kind of subdued a bit, because he has to play a sort of serious role, though he's also kind of a Lothario character. Carl Ottosen as Eric. I'm going to pronounce this as best I could. Ove Sprogue as Barry. Louis Meihe Renard as Svend with a D, not Sven. Peter Mönch as Carl. And like I said, it was written by Sidney Pink and Ib Melchior, who is a Danish science fiction writer, so actually quite a good one. He wrote the English version of Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires, which is a really good, creepy, weird science fiction movie that was definitely an influence on Alien. It also stars three really gorgeous women, Greta Thyssen as Greta, and Smyrner as Ingrid, and Mimi Heinrich as Ursula, who are all women who the main characters have known, and I'll get into the plot in a second. A UN spacecraft is sent in the year 2001 to the planet Uranus, because they've explored all the other planets and they haven't found any signs of life, at least not any intelligent life, on any of the planets or moons. So they're going to explore Uranus, and they send this spacecraft called Explorer 12, which is your typical rather phallic-looking rocket that they used at the time. And, there's like bad science, flames in outer space and all that stuff. But they go to they actually used, I was surprised, they used real footage of the launch of a Saturn 1B, which is the predecessor to the Saturn V, which took us to the moon, and which launched all the Mercury rockets during the launch sequence. And I thought that was good. Anyway, they go to Uranus. And they expect to find what they've been told it is, a frozen world that's mostly methane and liquid nitrogen, and it's freezing cold, and nobody should be able to survive there. They go into orbit, and they're basically confirm that it is the way people thought it was. There's no signs of life, and then they land, which this is science mistake number one. There's no, as far as I know, there is no solid surface on Uranus. It is gaseous, and any spacecraft would just sink, into this the surface. But suspending your disbelief, they land on the planet. At first, it just appears to be this frozen, white, methane covered planet, like they expected to find. And then one of them is talking about how he grew up in a forest. Sven, I think. Carl. It's Carl, and he's the youngest, and he's talking about this forest that he grew up in and how nice it was. Then they go outside, and there is a forest, and they're flabbergasted. They can walk outside without space helmets or space suits, which I found improbable. That's bad science too, but nobody would even attempt that on a planet that's supposed to be as cold. I think it's like minus 400 C or something like that on Uranus, if it had a solid surface, which it doesn't. But so they would definitely not be walking around, just in flight suits. But if you're willing to suspend your disbelief, what happens while they're on the ship? They suddenly freeze, and you hear this voice of a very eerie voice of an apparently alien creature, which appears to be disembodied. All you see is lights and sort of weird, swirling, kind of psychotic-looking things, saying that it is going to take them over, and it can read their minds and find out what's inside them and use it to destroy them. And then it's going to come to Earth and do the same thing to us. And then they suddenly revive, like, what happened? They don't know what happened. An apple the guy was holding, or a tomato rather, which was ripe when the guy was holding it, Eric, I think, is now rotten. And he says, well, how long a time passed? And I said, well, we think, you look at the chronometers, and they say it's, about 2 hours. Well, a tomato can't go from fresh to a shriveled up little husk in 2 hours, but that's what happened apparently. Apparently due to the influence of this apparently incorporeal being. You never, until the end, you don't actually see that it has any kind of a body. It's just a psychic projection of some sort. Weird things start to happen. They go out, and they can walk around without spacesuits for some reason, and it's warm, and they're carrying quote unquote laser guns, which actually look like caulking guns. I think they actually were caulking guns, just spray painted, and with extra barrel added to them. And then they find this forest, and they're looking, and all of a sudden one of them picks up a branch. It doesn't have any roots. It's not attached to anything. It's fake, and they find that all of them are like that. They're apparently living trees and living bushes, but they don't have any roots, and that's not possible. And then one of the scientists, Eric, pushes aside the trees, and he presses his hand up against something that's sort of yielding but solid. It's some sort of force field, he thinks, and they can't get through it. Well, Carl tries to put his hand through the force field, and it becomes frozen. He screams, and by all rights, it should have frozen off, and for some reason it doesn't. He recovers, and they're starting to get the hint that something's very wrong here. That this is not the way Uranus should look, and there's something weird. This force field goes all the way around, and they go back to the ship, and they decide, listen, we're going to have to try and go through this force field, but we're going to put on our spacesuits, and 2 of you are going to stay here on the ship. And we'll go in, and we're going to carry oxygen tanks for 6 hours. If we're not back after 6 hours, meet at the wall, and if we're not back in another hour, you guys take off and go back to Earth. And they agree they're going to do that. So they suit up, and these suits are rather goofy looking, but again, it's 1962. They're wearing what looks like welder's helmets. They definitely do not look airtight to me. They're like square, goofy, with clear face plates, and the oxygen cylinders are supposed to hold 6 hours, are about this big. That's not realistic, but even a diver's oxygen tank for enough air for 1 hour is much larger than that. But they go into the maybe technology is advanced, so again, maybe we can suspend our disbelief for that. So that they penetrate. They're looking around Oh, and one of them, before that happens, they're sitting around a campfire. This wood apparently will burn, even though it's not rooted to anything. And one of them's talking about this village that he grew up in, Eric, and about this girl that he knew called Ingrid, who he said was very beautiful. She looked like a queen or a goddess, and used to come around and give them like Christmas treats or something like that. And suddenly they see the village where he grew up, and it includes this windmill he was talking about, and a barn and a house. And inside the house he finds, surprise, surprise, Ingrid, who is played by the very lovely Anne Smyrner, Smyrner, Smyrner. Again, she is. She's a rather gorgeous blonde, very curvy, and Eric starts to talk to her, and how did you get here? She says, I'm always here, and I'll always be here if you want me to be here. And it's a little odd, and he orders the others to go out, and he kind of interrogates her a bit, and she can't really tell him very much. He realizes, this can't be real. It's an illusion. This can't be my village, And they go back to that's when they go back to the ship, and they decide they're going to go through the wall, and they put on the suits and all that. They go through the wall, and they find a very strange, sort of barren landscape of there's methane snow, which is completely devoid of water, so it forms a kind of a quicksand, and one of them falls into it, Sven, I think, and they Don and Eric pull him out of the quicksand at the last minute. So they've just got to walk on these rocks, and there are all these like weird, jagged, sort of spiky, glass-looking structures inside this cave, which is where they are. And they hear the voice of this strange alien saying, I'm going to destroy you. I'll use your own minds to create hallucinations, and you won't be able to resist them, and you're going to be destroyed. One of the lead, Don says, "Don't think about anything. Don't give it anything to think about." And all of them are kind of, their faces are frozen, except Eric can't keep it up, and all of a sudden the monster does appear, and it looks like a kind of a Tyrannosaurus mixed with a rat. Only it's a cyclops. It's only got one eye. They got big claws, and it's advancing towards them. The other two are able to break the psychic grip, as it were, of this thing, but Eric is frozen. He can't move. He's terrified. And they pull him away, and they use their ray guns, and they shoot at it. And again, it's really bad special. It's just scratched film, and you can see that it's scratched film. It's really bad. I mean, the rays don't even actually go in the same direction. They're like going all over the place. Even a laser doesn't do that. But they blind the rat monster so that they can run away. It doesn't necessarily kill it, just kind of blinds it, and now it's ineffectual. More strange things occur. There's more like attempted seductions by these creatures. One comes after Eric, Ingrid, who is, or Ursula, and then Greta is going after Dawn because he was attracted to her. He actually put up a picture of Greta Thyssen up on his locker before the movie starts, before the mission starts. So she's a manifestation of that photograph, and she's even wearing the same clothes as the photograph. And Don instantly knows you're not Greta, you're not who you are. But he's kind of flirting with her and being his usual self. He's kind of a smarmy guy. And I think John Agar did a good acting job playing that character. Each of these girls is obviously is an illusion, and the guys realize it pretty quickly, so it's not really fooling anybody, because they know they left these people back on Earth. Meanwhile, they're trying to figure out what to do. This creature tries to lure them into its cave again, and it creates a giant, enormous tarantula. Bad science again, violation of the square cube law. Square the size, you cube the weight. A giant tarantula would be crushed under its own exoskeleton, couldn't move at all. But again, apparently the makers of this movie didn't know that, even though it's like high school science. And then they use the rocks to crush the tarantula, shooting their lasers at the rocks, and they drop down and smush it. And it's really kind of a gross special effect because they're like lots of pus and stuff. It's obviously just like oatmeal or something. And then they're going to have, obviously they only have a certain amount of time to take off if they're this being, and they only call it that, the being, because you never fully see it, but it's like a one-eyed brain creature. It looks like a giant sort of a sponge, and they figure out the only way to kill it is with a kind of a different kind of acetylene torch. But one of the alien women finds out about this, and so the guy who's going to use it, which again I think was Eric, Carl. I'm sorry, it's Carl, the young boy, volunteers to use it. He builds it. He's going to use it, but his thoughts are too transparent. The creature reads them and kills him. It absorbs him into it, basically. So he never gets a chance to fire. But they used the liquid oxygen that they were using, I guess, to collect rock samples. And they turn it on the creature and freeze it, and then they can destroy it with their laser guns, which it's just break off pieces until it explodes, basically. Then the planet shifts back, and an earthquake starts. They go back onto the ship. They want to take. Eric wants to take Ingrid with him, and she says, "I can't go with you." He says, "Well, we can try." And gets her to climb up into the spacecraft, and they're getting ready to take off, and they do take off successfully, and the whole planet basically is kind of crumbling to pieces behind them because this creature that controlled it has died, and now all the control is gone. It turns back into its frozen self. And then they do take off successfully, and Eric embraces Ursula, and she just vanishes because, again, she was just an illusion created by this planet. And then the really corny song, Journey to the Seventh Planet, plays, and the titles are at the end rather than at the beginning, which I thought was kind of interesting. That's not a typical American thing. Again, really kind of grade Z science fiction movie. There's some good things. The spacesuits were fairly decent looking, although the gloves are kitchen washing up gloves, which I thought was really funny. And again, like I said, the helmets are very doofy looking, and there's a lot of bad dialogue and bad acting, but it's entertaining and funny.